The rifle shot cracked through the mountain air, just as Adelaide Greene was telling herself that civilized women did not travel alone into the Wyoming Territory wilderness. And now, someone was definitely trying to prove her right in the worst possible way. She pressed herself flat against the rocky outcrop, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through the confines of her proper Boston corset. The leather satchel containing her carefully drafted business plans dug into her ribs, a painful reminder of why she had ventured this far from the dusty main street of Hecla in the first place. The banker, that pompous Mr. Whitmore with his waxed mustache and condescending smile, had laughed directly in her face that morning. A hotel and restaurant establishment. "My dear Miss Greene, those dreams are far too big for a woman," he had said, leaning back in his chair as if the matter were settled. "Perhaps you should consider a seamstress shop or a millinery, something more befitting your delicate sensibilities." She had left his office with her jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached, clutching her rejected loan application like it was the last piece of her dignity. The year was 1876, and Adelaide had traveled 2,000 miles from Boston to start fresh in the Wyoming Territory, only to discover that the West, despite all its promises of opportunity, still held the same narrow views about what women could and could not accomplish. Another shot rang out, closer this time, and Adelaide realized with growing horror that whoever was shooting was moving in her direction. She had ventured up into the foothills to clear her head, to look down at the valley where she imagined her hotel would someday stand, to convince herself that one man's refusal would not be the end of her ambitions. Now that optimism seemed foolish in the face of very real danger. The sound of hoofbeats thundered somewhere to her left. Adelaide squeezed her eyes shut, offering up a desperate prayer to whatever deity watched over stubborn women who refused to know their place. She was 23 years old, far too young to die on a Wyoming mountainside with nothing to show for her dreams but a satchel full of rejected plans. Then she heard a different sound. A deep voice, rough as gravel, shouting something she could not quite make out. More gunfire, but this time it seemed to be moving away from her position. The hoofbeats grew louder, then faded. Adelaide remained frozen against the rock, hardly daring to breathe. "You can come out now. They are gone." The voice startled her so badly she nearly dropped her satchel. Adelaide turned to find a man standing about 10 feet away, and for a moment she forgot about the danger entirely, because she had never seen anyone quite like him in her life. He was massive, easily over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they blocked out a considerable portion of the late afternoon sun. His hair was dark brown and hung past his shoulders, tied back with a strip of leather. He wore buckskin clothing that had seen better days, and a rifle was slung casually over one shoulder as if it weighed nothing at all. But it was his face that caught her attention, a rugged, weathered face with sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of dark stubble. His eyes were an unexpected shade of blue, like the Wyoming sky on a clear winter morning. "Are you hurt?" he asked, and Adelaide realized she had been staring at him with her mouth slightly open, which was absolutely mortifying. "No," she managed, finding her voice. "No, I am fine." "Were those men shooting at me?" "Not at you specifically. Claim jumpers. Probably figured you saw something you should not have." He moved closer, and Adelaide noticed the way his muscles shifted beneath his shirt, the easy grace of someone who spent their life outdoors, someone who was completely comfortable in their own body. "What are you doing up here alone?" It was a reasonable question, but something in Adelaide bristled at his tone. She had been questioned enough for one day. "I was thinking," she said, lifting her chin. "Is that permitted, Or do I need a man's permission for that as well? To her surprise, the corner of his mouth twitched as if he was fighting a smile. Thinking is free, last I checked. But thinking up here alone without so much as a pistol on your belt, that is just asking for trouble. Well, I certainly did not plan to encounter trouble, Adelaide said, brushing dust from her dark blue traveling dress. I simply needed some air. The town was becoming rather suffocating. Hecla will do that to you, the man said. He shifted his rifle slightly, and Adelaide noticed his hands were large and calloused, the hands of someone who worked hard for a living. I am Quinn Dalton. I have a cabin about 2 miles north of here. Adelaide Greene, she replied automatically. I arrived in Hecla 3 weeks ago from Boston. Quinn's blue eyes studied her with an intensity that made her feel suddenly self-conscious. Long way from home. What brings a Boston lady to Wyoming? Ambition, Adelaide said before she could stop herself. Though according to certain individuals, I have far too much of it for a woman. Something flickered in Quinn's expression, an understanding that surprised her. Let me guess. You went to see Thomas Whitmore at the bank. You know him. Everyone knows him. And everyone knows he would not loan money to a woman if his life depended on it. Quinn glanced at the leather satchel she was still clutching. What were you trying to get funding for? Adelaide hesitated. She had shared her plans with exactly 3 people since arriving in Hecla. Her landlady, Mrs. Hutchins, who had been cautiously supportive. Sarah Chen, who ran the general store and had encouraged her. And Thomas Whitmore, who had crushed her dreams before she had even finished explaining them. But something about the way Quinn was looking at her, with genuine curiosity rather than condescension, made her want to tell him. A hotel, she said. With a proper restaurant attached, Hecla is growing and right now there is nowhere decent for travelers to stay. The boarding houses are all full, and the current hotel is barely better than a shack. I have experience. My family owned a very successful establishment in Boston before my father passed away. I know I could make it work here. Quinn was quiet for a moment and Adelaide braced herself for the inevitable dismissal. But instead he said, "Show me." "What? Your plans? Show me." Adelaide blinked at him. "You want to see my business plans?" "Unless that satchel is full of something else you are hauling around the mountains." She found herself pulling out the carefully folded papers, smoothing them against the rock face. The drawings were detailed, showing a 2-story building with 12 rooms upstairs and a large dining area on the ground floor. She had marked out where the kitchen would go, where the stables would be built, how the whole property would be laid out to maximize efficiency and guest comfort. Quinn studied the plans in silence, and Adelaide found herself holding her breath. She watched his face, trying to gauge his reaction, but his expression gave nothing away. The silence stretched on until she could not bear it anymore. "It is probably foolish," she said, reaching to take the papers back. "Everyone seems to think so." Quinn caught her wrist before she could snatch the plans away. His grip was gentle but firm, and Adelaide felt a shock run through her at the contact. "It is not foolish," he said, his voice low and serious. "It is actually brilliant. This section here, the way you have designed the kitchen to connect to both the dining room and the outside, that is smart thinking. And these measurements you have clearly calculated for expansion." Adelaide stared at him. "You can read architectural plans." "I can read a lot of things." Quinn released her wrist, but his eyes never left the drawings. "I spent 3 years building mining structures before I decided I preferred the mountains to the mines. This work is solid, Miss Greene." "The problem is not your plans. The problem is Whitmore. The problem is that I am a woman," Adelaide said bitterly. "He made that quite clear, then we go around him." "We?" Adelaide's heart skipped. I am sorry, Mr. Dalton, but I do not believe we have established any sort of partnership. Quinn looked up from the plans, and there was something fierce in his blue eyes that made Adelaide's breath catch. You want to build this hotel, more than anything. Then I will help you build it. The words hung in the air between them, absurd and impossible, and exactly what Adelaide needed to hear. She laughed, but it came out shaky. You do not even know me. Why would you possibly want to help me? Quinn folded the plans carefully and handed them back to her. Because I know what it is like to be told your dreams are too big. And because that hotel would be good for Hecla, whether Whitmore is smart enough to see it or not. He paused, then added more quietly, and because I can tell you are not going to give up on this, which means you will probably get yourself killed trying to do it alone. I am not helpless, Adelaide protested. Never said you were. But you do not know these mountains, and you do not know the people around here. You need someone who does. Quinn gestured down toward the valley. Sun is going to set soon. I should get you back to town before Mrs. Hutchins sends out a search party. How did you know I am staying with Mrs. Hutchins? Like I said, everyone knows everyone in Hecla. Quinn started walking, and after a moment's hesitation, Adelaide followed. The trek down the mountainside was easier with Quinn leading the way. He moved with the confident stride of someone who knew every rock and tree, occasionally glancing back to make sure Adelaide was keeping up. She found herself studying him when she thought he was not looking, trying to understand what had just happened. A complete stranger had just offered to help her build her dreams. It made no logical sense. Can I ask you something? She said as they navigated a particularly steep section. Go ahead. Why do you live up here alone, in a cabin in the mountains? Quinn was quiet for so long that Adelaide thought he might not answer. Then he said, after I left the mining company I needed space, needed quiet. The mountains give me both. You not get lonely, sometimes. He offered her his hand to help her down a rocky drop, and Adelaide took it, feeling again that strange jolt at the contact. But loneliness is better than being around people who try to make you into something you are not. Adelaide understood that sentiment more than she cared to admit. Her entire life in Boston had been a series of expectations she could never quite meet. Be quieter, Adelaide. Be more demure, Adelaide. Stop asking so many questions. Stop having so many opinions. Stop wanting so much more than a respectable marriage and a quiet life. Her father had understood. He had encouraged her interest in the hotel business, had taught her everything he knew. But after he died and her mother remarried, Adelaide had found herself suffocating under the weight of everyone's disappointed sighs. My stepfather told me I was an embarrassment, she found herself saying. He said no decent man would want to marry a woman who cared more about ledgers than needlework. Then no decent man deserves you, Quinn said simply. The words were so matter-of-fact, delivered without any of the flowery flattery she was used to hearing from men who were trying to court her, that Adelaide felt them strike something deep in her chest. They reached the edge of the foothills as the sun was beginning to paint the sky in shades of orange and gold, and Hecla spread out before them, a collection of wooden buildings clustered along a dirt road that served as the main street. I will come by Mrs. Hutchins' place tomorrow, Quinn said as they approached the edge of town. We can discuss the details of your hotel then. Mr. Dalton, Adelaide said, and he turned to look at her. I have very little money. I cannot pay you for your help. Did I ask for payment? No, but I cannot simply accept charity. Quinn's expression softened slightly. It is not charity, Miss Greene. It is investment. You build that hotel, you are going to need someone to supply you with lumber from the mountain forests. Someone who knows which trees to cut and how to transport them down. That someone could be me, and that would be a business arrangement that benefits us both. Adelaide felt something loosen in her chest. A business arrangement she could accept. A business arrangement made sense, gave her a way to maintain her dignity while accepting the help she desperately needed. "Then we have an agreement, Mr. Dalton." "Quinn," he said. "If we are going to be business partners, you should call me Quinn. Then you should call me Adelaide." He nodded, and Adelaide thought she saw approval in his blue eyes. "Tomorrow, then, Adelaide." He tipped his head to her in a gesture that was almost a bow, then turned and headed back toward the mountains. Adelaide watched him go. This strange man who had appeared out of nowhere and offered her hope when she had been ready to give up. She did not understand it, did not understand him, but for the first time since Thomas Whitmore had laughed in her face, she felt like her dreams might actually be possible. Mrs. Hutchins was waiting on the porch when Adelaide arrived at the boarding house, her round face creased with worry. "Lord have mercy, child, where have you been? You have been gone for hours." "I went for a walk," Adelaide said, "to clear my head. I am sorry I worried you." "A walk? Adelaide, you cannot just go wandering off into the wilderness like that. This is not Boston. There are dangers out here that you cannot even imagine." Mrs. Hutchins ushered her inside, still fussing. "Did something happen at the bank? You looked so upset when you left this morning." Adelaide sank into a chair in the boarding house's small parlor. The room was cozy, with lace curtains and a collection of mismatched furniture that somehow worked together. "Mr. Whitmore rejected my loan application. He said my dreams were too big for a woman." Mrs. Hutchins made a disgusted sound. "Thomas Whitmore is a fool. I have been saying it for years, but no one listens to me. What are you going to do now?" "I am going to build my hotel anyway," Adelaide said, and the conviction in her own voice surprised her. "I met someone today, a man named Quinn Dalton. He has offered to help me." Mrs. Hutchins' eyebrows shot up. "The mountain man, Quinn Dalton, offered to help you. You know him." "Everyone knows of him, though few have actually met him. He keeps to himself mostly, comes into town maybe once a month for supplies. There are all sorts of rumors about him." Mrs. Hutchins leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Some say he killed a man in a mining dispute. Others say he is running from something back east. But Sarah Chen, who actually talks to him when he comes to the store, she says he is just a man who prefers his own company." Adelaide thought of the way Quinn had studied her hotel plans, the intelligence in his eyes, the gentle way he had handled her wrist when stopping her from taking the papers back. "He did not seem dangerous to me. He seemed kind." "Well, Mrs. Hutchins said slowly, "I suppose if Quinn Dalton has taken an interest in your project, you could do worse for a partner. He has a reputation for being fair and honest, even if he is a bit rough around the edges. Just be careful, dear. A young woman like you, spending time with a man like that, people will talk." "Let them talk," Adelaide said firmly. "I did not come all the way to Wyoming to worry about gossip." That night, Adelaide lay in her narrow bed and stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. Everything had changed so quickly. This morning she had been defeated, ready to pack her bags and admit that everyone had been right, that her dreams were too big, that she should have stayed in Boston and married the boring banker her stepfather had picked out for her. Now she had a partner, someone who believed in her plans, someone who wanted to help her build something extraordinary. She thought about Quinn Dalton, about the way his presence had made her feel both safe and strangely unsettled. He was unlike any man she had ever encountered. The men in Boston had been soft, with pale hands and carefully groomed appearances. Quinn was all rough edges and hard muscle, a man who looked like he had been carved from the very mountains he called home. But it was not just his appearance that intrigued her. It was the way he had looked at her plans with respect, the way he had immediately understood her vision, the way he had spoken to her as an equal rather than a silly woman who needed to be humored. Sleep came slowly, and when it did, Adelaide dreamed of a grand hotel rising from the Wyoming soil, strong hands helping her build it, and blue eyes watching her with something that might have been admiration. True to his word, Quinn appeared at Mrs. Hutchins' boarding house the next morning. Adelaide was in the parlor going over her plans again when she heard his distinctive knock, firm but not aggressive. Mrs. Hutchins answered the door and ushered him in with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. In the daylight, inside the confines of the small parlor, Quinn seemed even larger. He had cleaned up somewhat, his hair tied back neatly, and his buckskin shirt replaced with a plain cotton one that did nothing to hide the impressive breadth of his shoulders. He held his hat in his hands and nodded politely to Mrs. Hutchins before his eyes found Adelaide. "Miss Greene," he said formally. "Mr. Dalton," Adelaide replied, trying to ignore the way her heart had jumped at the sight of him. "Please sit down." They spent the next hour going over her plans in detail. Quinn asked questions that showed he had been thinking about the project seriously, practical questions about foundation and materials, about water supply and waste management, about all the unglamorous details that would make or break the venture. Adelaide found herself relaxing as they talked, falling into the comfortable rhythm of discussing something she knew intimately. "The biggest problem is the initial construction," Quinn said, leaning back in his chair. "Even if we do most of the work ourselves, you are still going to need to hire additional labor. That means paying wages, and you will need to buy materials I cannot provide, things like nails and glass for windows. How much money do you have saved?" Adelaide told him and watched his expression carefully. It was not a large sum, nowhere near what Thomas Whitmore had estimated she would need, but Quinn simply nodded thoughtfully. "It is enough to start," he said. "If we are smart about it, we begin with the frame and the basic structure. Once people see we are serious, once they see something actually being built, you will have an easier time getting investors. People around here, they respect action more than plans." "And you truly believe this can work?" Adelaide asked. She needed to hear him say it again, needed that reassurance. Quinn met her eyes directly. "I would not be here if I did not." Over the next few days, they fell into a pattern. Quinn would arrive each morning, and they would work on refining the plans, making them more practical, figuring out how to stretch Adelaide's limited funds as far as possible. Quinn knew where to find deals on materials, which local craftsmen might be willing to work for reduced rates in exchange for future considerations, how to navigate the complex social dynamics of a small Wyoming town. But it was not all business. Adelaide found herself looking forward to their conversations, which ranged far beyond the hotel project. Quinn told her about the mountains, about the wildlife and the changing seasons, about the harsh beauty of Wyoming winters. He spoke sparingly, never using 10 words when 5 would do, but when he did speak, it was with a quiet intelligence that Adelaide found increasingly attractive. For his part, Quinn seemed genuinely interested in Adelaide's stories about Boston, about the hotel her father had run, about the differences between Eastern and Western society. He listened intently, occasionally asking questions that showed he was really paying attention, not just humoring her. "Your father sounds like he was a good man," Quinn said one afternoon as they sat in Mrs. Hutchins' parlor reviewing supply lists. "He was," Adelaide said softly. "He believed I could do anything I set my mind to. He was the only one who did. He was not wrong." The simple statement, delivered in Quinn's matter-of-fact way, made Adelaide's throat tighten with emotion. She looked down at her papers to hide the tears that threatened to form. "Thank you for that. Just stating facts." They were interrupted by a knock at the door. Mrs. Hutchins answered it, and Adelaide heard a familiar voice that made her stomach drop. Thomas Whitmore swept into the parlor, his expensive suit and waxed mustache looking absurdly out of place. "Miss Greene," he said, barely glancing at Quinn, "I heard you were still pursuing this hotel nonsense. I felt it my duty to warn you that you are making a terrible mistake." Adelaide stood, drawing herself up to her full height. "Mr. Whitmore, I did not invite you here." "No, but as a prominent businessman in this town, I feel responsible for preventing poor decisions that could harm our community." Whitmore finally acknowledged Quinn's presence, his lip curling slightly. "Especially when those decisions involve unsavory partnerships." Quinn had gone very still, his expression unreadable. But Adelaide saw the way his jaw tightened, the way his large hands curled slightly on his knees. "Mr. Dalton is helping me with a legitimate business venture," Adelaide said coldly. "One that you refuse to support. Because it is doomed to fail. You have no experience running a hotel on your own, Miss Greene. Your father may have owned one, but you were just a girl helping out. This is serious business, requiring serious capital and serious expertise, neither of which you possess." Whitmore turned to Quinn. "And you, Dalton, you should know better than to encourage her in this fantasy. When it falls apart, and it will, the blame will fall on you for leading her astray." Quinn stood, and Adelaide was reminded forcefully of just how physically imposing he was. Whitmore actually took a step back. "Seems to me the only person leading anyone astray is you," Quinn said quietly. "Telling a smart woman with good plans that she is not capable simply because of her gender, that is what is doomed to fail, Whitmore. The world is changing, even if you are too stuck in your ways to see it." Whitmore's face flushed red. "How dare you? I am a respected member of this community. And she will be too once her hotel is built. Now I think you should leave." For a moment, Adelaide thought Whitmore might argue further. But something in Quinn's stance, in the quiet menace of his tone, made the banker reconsider. He turned to Adelaide instead. "When this venture collapses, do not come crying to me for help," he said. Then he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Adelaide released a breath she had not realized she was holding. "That man is insufferable. He is scared," Quinn said, sitting back down. "Men like him, they need the world to stay exactly as it is, because change threatens their position. You succeeding means he was wrong, and men like Whitmore cannot stand being wrong." Adelaide sank back into her chair. "What if he is right, though? Not about women being incapable, but about me specifically. What if I am being foolish? What if I am just a girl who helped out in her father's hotel, and now thinks she can run one herself?" Quinn was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "2 days ago, you correctly identified a problem with the water drainage system that I missed. Yesterday, you recalculated the supply costs and found a way to save $50 without compromising quality. This morning, you proposed a partnership arrangement with the local farms to supply fresh food for the restaurant, which would benefit everyone involved. Those are not the actions of someone playing pretend. Those are the actions of a smart businesswoman who knows exactly what she is doing." Adelaide felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "You really believe that? I do not say things I do not mean." Their eyes met and held, and Adelaide felt something shift between them, something that went beyond business partnership. She saw the way Quinn was looking at her, with an intensity that made her breath catch, and she realized she was looking at him the same way. The moment was broken by Mrs. Hutchins entering with tea, but the air between them remained charged with something unspoken. That night, Adelaide could not sleep. She kept thinking about Quinn, about the way he had defended her to Whitmore, about the quiet confidence he had in her abilities. She had known him for less than a week, but somehow he had become essential to her plans, to her dreams. And if she was being honest with herself, which she tried to be even when it was uncomfortable, he was becoming essential to her in other ways too. She thought about his hands, large and capable, always gentle when they brushed against hers as they worked together. She thought about his eyes, that startling blue that seemed to see right through her carefully maintained composure. She thought about the way her heart raced when she heard his knock at the door each morning. Adelaide had been courted before, by proper Boston gentlemen with excellent prospects and impeccable manners. She had found them all deadly boring. But Quinn, who wore buckskin and lived alone in the mountains, who spoke sparingly but always with purpose, who looked at her like she was someone worth listening to, he was anything but boring. The next morning, Quinn arrived with news. "I found your construction site." Adelaide nearly spilled her coffee. "You what?" "Property on the edge of town, near the main road but with enough space for expansion. The owner is willing to sell for a fair price, and the location is perfect. Good water access, visible to travelers coming into Hecla, close enough to town for convenience but far enough away that you will not be dealing with constant noise." Quinn pulled out a rough map he had drawn. "I wanted to see it before mentioning it to you, make sure it was worth considering. It is." They spent the morning walking the property. Quinn had been right. It was perfect. The land was mostly flat, which would make construction easier, and there was a small stream running along one edge that could be used for water supply. Adelaide stood in the center of the plot and turned slowly, imagining her hotel rising from the earth, imagining guests arriving, imagining the dream becoming reality. "This is it," she said softly. "This is where I want to build." Quinn was standing a few feet away, watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "Then we should make an offer on the land." The negotiations took 3 days, but by the end of the week, Adelaide owned 5 acres of prime Wyoming property. The transaction took almost half of her savings, but as she held the deed in her hands, she felt like she was holding proof that this was really happening. "We start construction in 2 weeks, Quinn said as they stood once again on the property, this time as its owners. Well, Adelaide was the owner, but Quinn had been so instrumental in the purchase that it felt like a shared victory. "I need that time to select and cut the timber, get it down from the mountains. Meanwhile, you need to finalize your supply orders and start hiring." Adelaide nodded, already making mental lists. "Quinn, I want to pay you for the timber, fair market price. We talked about this. You pay me once the hotel is operational and turning a profit. Until then, consider it my investment. You are already investing your time and expertise. I cannot ask you to provide materials for free as well." Quinn turned to face her fully. The afternoon sun was behind him, creating a halo effect in his long hair, and Adelaide had to remind herself to breathe. "You are not asking, I am offering. There is a difference." "But why?" The question burst out of her before she could stop it. "Why are you doing all this? You barely know me. This project is going to take months, maybe even a year. You are putting your entire life on hold to help me build a hotel. I need to understand why." Quinn was quiet for a long time, his blue eyes searching her face. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough with something that might have been emotion. "Because when I look at you, I see someone who refused to accept the limitations everyone tried to place on her. I see someone who traveled 2,000 miles to chase a dream, someone who did not give up even when the banker laughed in her face. That kind of courage, that kind of determination, it deserves to be supported. That is not a good enough reason to derail your life," Adelaide insisted. It is not the only reason. Quinn took a step closer to her, and Adelaide's heart began to pound. The truth is, Adelaide, I have not cared about anything or anyone in a long time. After I left the mining company, I told myself I was better off alone. It was easier that way, safer. But then I saw you pressed against that rock face, stubborn and scared but refusing to panic, and something in me just knew. This woman, this is someone worth knowing. This woman's dreams are worth fighting for. Adelaide felt her breath catch. Quinn. I am not saying this to make you uncomfortable, he continued. I know we have a business arrangement and I will respect that, but you asked for honesty, so here it is. I am helping you because I believe in your hotel, yes. But also because somewhere in the past week, I started believing in you, in us, in the possibility that maybe I do not have to spend the rest of my life alone in those mountains. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest in a way that Adelaide had never experienced before. The men in Boston had courted her with flowery poetry and practiced compliments. Quinn was offering her truth, unvarnished and vulnerable. I care about you too, Adelaide heard herself say. I have been trying not to, because this is all so complicated and there is so much at stake. But I cannot seem to help it. Every morning when I hear your knock on Mrs. Hutchins' door, my heart does this ridiculous little jump. When we are working together and our hands accidentally touch, I feel it everywhere. And when you defended me to Whitmore, I wanted to kiss you so badly I had to physically restrain myself. Quinn's eyes widened slightly at her blunt admission. Then, slowly, he smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face. You are the most remarkable woman I have ever met. Is that your way of saying you wanted to kiss me too, Adelaide Greene? I have wanted to kiss you since the moment you told me to my face that you did not need a man's permission to think. Well then, Adelaide said, her own smile growing, perhaps we should stop wasting time talking about it. Quinn closed the distance between them in 2 long strides. His hands came up to cup her face, gentle despite their size, and Adelaide had just enough time to see the question in his eyes, to give the tiniest nod of permission before his lips met hers. The kiss was nothing like the chaste pecks she had received from her Boston suitors. It was deep and thorough, Quinn kissing her like she was water and he had been wandering the desert for days. His hands slid from her face into her hair, dislodging pins, and Adelaide did not care at all. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing herself against the solid wall of his chest, feeling the hard muscles she had been surreptitiously admiring for the past week. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adelaide felt dizzy with want and joy and the sheer rightness of being in his arms. We probably should not do that in public, Quinn said, but he was still holding her close. We are on my property, Adelaide pointed out. Technically, this is private, he laughed, a sound she had never heard from him before and immediately wanted to hear again. You make a good argument. They stood there for a while longer, wrapped in each other's arms, looking out at the land where Adelaide's hotel would stand. It occurred to her that she had come to Wyoming looking for independence, for the freedom to build her own life on her own terms. She had never expected to find a partner, someone who made her dreams bigger rather than smaller, someone who saw her ambition as an asset rather than a flaw. People are going to talk, she said quietly, about us working together, about the amount of time we spend alone together. Let them talk. Mrs. Hutchins already warned me. She said my reputation could be damaged. Quinn pulled back enough to look at her seriously. Then we do things properly. I court you with all the proper protocols. Chaperoned visits, public outings, the whole thing. I want to build this hotel with you, Adelaide, but more than that, I want to build a life with you. If following society's rules for a while makes that possible, then that is what we will do. Adelaide felt something warm and solid settle in her chest. You would do that, even though you clearly do not care much for society's rules. For you, yes. She kissed him again, softer this time, trying to pour all of her gratitude and affection and growing love into the gesture. Because it was love, she realized. Impossibly fast, completely unexpected but undeniably real. She was falling in love with Quinn Dalton, the mountain man who had appeared out of nowhere and promised to help her build her dreams. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Quinn spent his days in the mountains, selecting and cutting timber, while Adelaide handled the countless other details required to start a major construction project. She negotiated with suppliers, interviewed potential workers, and fought against the subtle, and not so subtle resistance she encountered from men who did not believe a woman should be undertaking such a venture. But she also spent time with Quinn, properly chaperoned by Mrs. Hutchins or Sarah Chen from the general store. They took walks through Hekla's small main street, attended a church social together, had dinner at the boarding house. It was all very correct and respectable, but Adelaide could feel the electric current that ran between them during every interaction, the barely restrained desire to touch more than was socially acceptable. Sarah Chen became a valuable ally. The Chinese woman who ran the general store had faced her own share of prejudice and discrimination, and she understood Adelaide's struggles in a way that most of Hekla's residents could not. "You are brave," Sarah told Adelaide one afternoon as they sat in the store's back room, ostensibly doing inventory but mostly just talking. "Coming here alone, refusing to give up when Whitmore rejected you, finding a way forward anyway. You remind me of myself when I first arrived." "How long have you been here?" Adelaide asked. 5 years. My husband and I came to work on the railroad, but he died in an accident during the first year. Everyone expected me to leave to go back to San Francisco or give up. Instead, I took the money from his life insurance and bought this store. Sarah smiled. The town was scandalized, a Chinese woman running a business on her own, but I made it work and eventually most people accepted it. Did you face a lot of opposition? Some. There were people who refused to shop here at first, but I had good products and fair prices, and eventually need overcame prejudice. It will be the same with your hotel. Once people see the quality of what you are building, once they experience your hospitality, they will come around. Adelaide hoped Sarah was right. The resistance she was facing was exhausting, a constant drip of condescension and doubt that wore away at her confidence. But then she would see Quinn, or work on her plans, or stand on her property and imagine the finished hotel, and her determination would return. Finally, construction day arrived. Quinn had transported enough timber down from the mountains to begin building the frame, and Adelaide had hired a crew of 5 men willing to work for slightly below standard wages in exchange for guaranteed employment throughout the project. They were a rough bunch, but they knew their trade and, more importantly, they were willing to take orders from a woman. The first day was challenging. The workers kept looking to Quinn for direction, even though Adelaide was technically their employer. But Quinn, bless him, consistently redirected them back to her. "Miss Greene is the boss," he would say firmly. "If you have questions about the design or the process, you ask her." It took a few days, but eventually the crew adjusted. They began to see that Adelaide knew what she was talking about, that her plans were solid, that her decisions made sense. The framework began to rise, strong wooden beams stretching toward the Wyoming sky, and Adelaide felt pride swell in her chest every time she looked at it. Quinn worked alongside the crew, his strength and skill evident in everything he did. Adelaide tried not to get distracted watching him, but it was difficult. He moved with such confident grace, lifting beams that took 2 other men to handle, his muscles flexing beneath his shirt. More than once, she caught him watching her too, and the heat in his eyes made her blush. They still followed the proprieties, still maintained appropriate distance in public. But the looks they exchanged, the brief touches when passing tools or supplies, the way they stood just a little too close when reviewing the day's progress, all of it spoke to the building tension between them. One evening, about 3 weeks into construction, Quinn asked Adelaide to take a walk with him. Mrs. Hutchins agreed to chaperone from a discreet distance, and they headed out to the property as the sun was beginning to set. The frame was about a quarter complete, the skeleton of Adelaide's dream taking physical form. They stood together looking at it, and Adelaide felt Quinn take her hand. Behind them, Mrs. Hutchins busied herself examining some wildflowers, giving them a moment of relative privacy. "I need to tell you something," Quinn said quietly, "about why I left the mining company, about what I was running from when I came to these mountains." Adelaide squeezed his hand. "You do not have to tell me anything you are not ready to share. I want to. You deserve to know." Quinn was quiet for a moment, clearly gathering his thoughts. "I worked for a mining operation about 50 miles south of here. The owner, Jackson Ferris, he was cutting corners to maximize profit. Unsafe working conditions, excessive hours, no proper equipment. I tried to address it through proper channels, but Ferris had the local authorities in his pocket." Quinn's jaw tightened as he continued. "One day there was a collapse. 6 men died, men I had worked alongside, men with families, and it was completely preventable. If Ferris had just invested in proper support beams, if he had listened to any of the warnings we gave him, those men would still be alive. I confronted him in front of everyone, told him he had blood on his hands. He had me blacklisted, spread rumors that I was a troublemaker, made sure I would never work in mining again." "I am so sorry," Adelaide said softly. "That must have been horrible. The worst part was feeling powerless. I had tried to do the right thing and it got me nowhere. So I walked away from all of it, came up into these mountains, told myself I was better off not caring, not getting involved. And then I met you." He turned to look at her directly. "You reminded me that some things are worth fighting for. Your hotel, your dreams, they are worth fighting for. And you, Adelaide, you are definitely worth fighting for." Adelaide felt tears prick her eyes. Those men were lucky to have someone like you advocating for them, even if it did not end the way it should have. And I am lucky to have you advocating for me now. "I am the lucky one," Quinn said. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Adelaide, I know we have not known each other very long. I know by society's standards I should wait at least a year before asking you this. But I am not very good at following society's standards, and life has taught me that time is precious and should not be wasted. So I am going to ask you something, and you can say no, or you can tell me I am rushing things, and I will understand and I will wait." Adelaide's heart began to pound. "Quinn, what are you saying?" He took both of her hands now, holding them gently in his much larger ones. "I am saying that I love you. I am saying that somewhere between that first moment when I saw you pressed against that rock face and right now, standing here watching your dreams literally taking shape, I fell completely and irrevocably in love with you. I love your courage and your stubbornness and your brilliant mind. I love the way you look at the world like it is full of possibilities rather than limitations. I love your smile and your laugh and the way you bite your lip when you are concentrating on a problem." "Quinn," Adelaide breathed, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "I know I am not what most people would consider a good catch. I live in a cabin in the mountains. I do not have a fancy education or a prestigious job. But I can promise you this. I will spend every day of my life making sure you have everything you need to chase your dreams. I will stand beside you against anyone who tries to tear you down. I will be your partner in every sense of the word." Quinn reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It was simple, a silver band with a single blue stone set in the center, the stone almost the exact shade of his eyes. "This was my grandmother's," he said. "It is the only thing of value I own. Adelaide Greene, will you marry me?" Adelaide felt tears streaming down her face now, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. "Yes," she said. "Yes, of course, yes." Quinn's face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen on him. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and Adelaide heard Mrs. Hutchins give a little cheer from her position near the wildflowers. When they finally broke apart, Quinn was laughing, a sound of pure joy that Adelaide felt echo in her own chest. "I was not sure you would say yes," he admitted. "I thought maybe I was being too presumptuous, moving too fast." "You were both of those things," Adelaide said, but she was laughing too. "But you were also absolutely right. Life is too short to waste time pretending we do not know exactly what we want. And I want you, Quinn Dalton. I want to build this hotel with you. And then I want to build a life with you. And I want to wake up every morning for the rest of my life knowing that I get to be loved by you." They stood there on the property as the sun set, wrapped in each other's arms, and Adelaide thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had left Boston angry and hurt, feeling like a failure, wondering if her dreams really were too big for someone like her. But she had not given up. She had come to Wyoming, had stood up to the banker who dismissed her, had found a way forward when everyone said it was impossible. And she had found Quinn, this remarkable man who saw her not as a delicate woman who needed protecting, but as a capable partner who deserved respect. He had offered to help her build her dreams, and in doing so had become part of those dreams himself. The next day, Adelaide and Quinn announced their engagement. The news spread through Hecla like wildfire. Most people were happy for them. Mrs. Hutchins cried actual tears of joy, and Sarah Chen gave Adelaide a beautiful silk scarf as an engagement present. But there were others, like Thomas Whitmore, who viewed the engagement with suspicion and disdain. "I knew it," Whitmore said when he encountered Adelaide on the main street. "This whole hotel scheme was just a way to trap yourself a husband. You are not a businesswoman at all." Adelaide felt Quinn stiffen beside her, but she laid a gentle hand on his arm, silently asking him to let her handle this. "Mr. Whitmore," she said calmly, "I came to Wyoming to build a hotel. The fact that I found a life partner in the process does not diminish my business ambitions any more than your marriage diminishes yours. Quinn and I are partners in every sense of the word. We will build this hotel together, and it will be successful, and you will have to live with the knowledge that you turned down the chance to be part of it." She took Quinn's arm and walked away, leaving Whitmore sputtering behind them. "That was magnificent," Quinn said quietly once they were out of earshot. "That was necessary," Adelaide replied. "People like Whitmore will always try to diminish what I accomplish. I cannot let them see that their words affect me." "Even when they do affect you," Adelaide looked up at him. "How did you know?" "Because I know you. And because I see the way your hands clench when people make comments like that." Quinn stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "You do not have to pretend with me, Adelaide. You can be strong and also admit when things hurt. Those two things are not mutually exclusive." She felt something tight in her chest loosen. Quinn was right. She had spent so long maintaining a facade of perfect confidence that she had almost forgotten she was allowed to be human, to be vulnerable. "It does hurt," she admitted. "Every time someone suggests I am not a real businesswoman, Every time someone implies I am using my gender to manipulate people, it hurts. I work twice as hard as any man would have to, and still people question my abilities. I know, and it is not fair. But Adelaide, the hotel is 1/4 built. You are making it happen despite all the obstacles. That is not manipulation or luck. That is skill and determination and sheer force of will. Quinn cupped her face gently. And anyone who cannot see that is a fool. Construction continued steadily over the next few months. The frame was completed, then the walls, then the roof. Adelaide was there every day, overseeing every detail, making decisions, solving problems. She learned to read the weather like the experienced workers did, knowing when rain was coming and they needed to protect the materials. She learned which suppliers were reliable and which would try to shortchange her because she was a woman. She learned to stand her ground with the crew when they questioned her decisions, to demand respect through competence and consistency. And through it all, Quinn was beside her. He worked harder than anyone, often starting before dawn and not stopping until well after sunset. But he also made sure Adelaide took breaks, brought her food when she forgot to eat, caught her when she literally stumbled from exhaustion. He was partner and protector both, supporting her dreams while also making sure she did not destroy herself in pursuit of them. They set a wedding date for late October, after the hotel's exterior would be completed, but before winter made travel and construction difficult. Adelaide wanted to be married at the building site, surrounded by the dream they were creating together. As the months passed, Adelaide and Quinn's relationship deepened. They spent what little free time they had together, talking about their hopes for the future, sharing stories from their pasts, planning not just the hotel but their life together. Quinn told her about his childhood in Missouri, about parents who had died young and left him to make his own way. Adelaide told him about her privileged but restrictive upbringing in Boston, about her father's death, and her mother's remarriage to a man who viewed Adelaide as more burden than daughter. "I think your father would be proud of you," Quinn said one evening as they sat together on the hotel's partially completed porch, watching the sun set over the Wyoming landscape. "You are making his dream come true, even though he is not here to see it." Adelaide leaned her head against Quinn's shoulder. "I think he would be proud of both of us. This is becoming our dream now, not just mine." "Our dream," Quinn repeated softly. "I like the sound of that." By September, the hotel's exterior was nearly complete. It was a beautiful building, 2 stories tall with wide windows that would let in plenty of light, a wrap-around porch on the ground floor, and a sturdy roof that would stand up to Wyoming's harsh winters. Adelaide had insisted on quality materials and workmanship throughout, even when it meant spending more money and taking more time. "This hotel needs to last," she had told Quinn. "This is not just for us. This is the legacy we are leaving." The interior work was progressing as well. The rooms were being framed. The kitchen was taking shape. The grand dining room that would be the restaurant's centerpiece was being built according to Adelaide's exacting specifications. She had designed everything to maximize efficiency while also creating an atmosphere of comfort and welcome. Word of the hotel had spread beyond Hecla. Travelers passing through stopped to look at the construction, impressed by the scale and quality of the project. Several had already made reservations for when the hotel opened, and Adelaide had started receiving inquiries from people interested in holding events in the dining room. "You are going to need staff," Sarah Chen pointed out during one of their regular conversations. "Housekeepers, cooks, servers, people to manage the front desk. Have you thought about hiring?" Adelaide had thought about it extensively. "I want to hire people who need opportunities, women who have been told they are not capable of serious work, immigrants who face discrimination." People like us, Sarah, who have had to fight for every scrap of respect they have gotten. Sarah smiled. Then I know several people you should talk to. True to her word, Sarah helped Adelaide connect with potential employees. A young widow named Emma who needed to support her 3 children. A Chinese couple, the Wangs, who were excellent cooks but had struggled to find work because of prejudice. A former slave named Benjamin who had come west after the war looking for a fresh start but had found limited opportunities. Adelaide interviewed each of them personally, and by the time she was done, she had assembled a staff of 8 people, each bringing their own skills and experiences to the venture. She paid them fair wages, better than what they could get elsewhere, and made it clear that she valued their contributions equally regardless of their gender or background. "You are building more than a hotel," Quinn observed as they watched Adelaide train her new staff. "You are building a community." "Is that not what business should do?" Adelaide replied. "Create opportunities, bring people together, make a place better than it was before." Quinn pulled her into his arms, not caring that they were in full view of the workers. "Have I mentioned recently that I am madly in love with you? Not in the last hour or so. Then I am overdue. Adelaide Greene, I am madly, completely, irrevocably in love with you." She kissed him, soft and sweet, tasting happiness and future and home on his lips. "Good. Because I am madly in love with you too, Quinn Dalton." The wedding took place on a clear October afternoon with the mostly completed hotel as their backdrop. The ceremony was simple, conducted by the traveling preacher who came through Hecla once a month. Adelaide wore a simple blue dress that matched her engagement ring, and she carried wildflowers that Quinn had picked for her that morning from the mountains. Mrs. Hutchins cried through the entire ceremony. Sarah Chen stood up as Adelaide's witness, while Benjamin, who had quickly become Quinn's friend, stood up for him. The hotel staff was there, along with most of the construction crew and a good portion of Hecla's population. Even Thomas Whitmore showed up, though he stood at the back and left quickly after the ceremony ended. "I promise to love you for all of my days," Quinn said when it was time for vows, his deep voice steady and sure. "I promise to be your partner in dreams and in life. I promise to stand beside you against anyone who tries to tear you down. I promise to build with you, to grow with you, to face whatever comes with you at my side." Adelaide felt tears streaming down her face as she made her own vows. "I promise to love you with everything I am. I promise to chase our dreams together, to never stop fighting for what we believe in. I promise to be your partner, your friend, your love, for all the years we are given. You saw me when I needed to be seen, believed in me when I needed belief, and loved me when I needed love. I will spend my life giving all of that back to you." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Quinn kissed Adelaide like it was the first time and the last time all at once, like she was precious and perfect and everything he had ever wanted. The gathered crowd cheered, and Adelaide laughed against his lips, giddy with joy. The reception was held in the hotel's nearly finished dining room. The Wangs had prepared a feast, combining traditional American dishes with some of their own cultural specialties, and the result was magnificent. There was music and dancing, laughter and toasts. Mrs. Hutchins declared it the best wedding Hecla had ever seen. As the evening wore on and the stars came out, Quinn took Adelaide's hand and led her out onto the porch. Behind them, they could hear the party continuing, but out here it was just the two of them, standing on the porch of the hotel they had built together. "Happy?" Quinn asked softly. "Impossibly, completely happy," Adelaide said. She looked up at the man who was now her husband, this strong, kind, wonderful man who had changed the entire trajectory of her life. "A year ago I was in Boston, feeling trapped and hopeless, convinced my life was going to be small and suffocating. And now look at me. I am standing on the porch of my own hotel, married to the most remarkable man I have ever met, about to start a business I designed and built myself. Sometimes I have to pinch myself to make sure this is all real." Quinn pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist. "It is real. We made it real together." "Together," Adelaide echoed. "I like the sound of that." They stood there for a while, wrapped in each other's arms, looking out at the Wyoming landscape that had become their home. Adelaide thought about the banker who had told her that her dreams were too big for a woman. She thought about all the people who had doubted her, who had dismissed her abilities, who had tried to make her smaller. And she felt a fierce satisfaction knowing that she had proved them all wrong. But more than that, she felt grateful. Grateful for the challenges that had forced her to be stronger. Grateful for the journey that had brought her to Quinn. Grateful for every moment, good and bad, that had led to this perfect evening. "I love you," she said softly. "I love you too," Quinn replied. "Now and always." The hotel, which Adelaide decided to call the Quinn Dalton Hotel, opened its doors in early November of 1876. The opening was a massive success, with every room booked for the first 2 weeks. Travelers who had been enduring Hekla's subpar lodging options were thrilled to finally have a comfortable, well-run establishment. The restaurant became popular with locals as well as guests, the Wang's cooking earning rave reviews. Adelaide had worried that running the hotel would be overwhelming, but she discovered she loved it. She loved greeting guests, loved solving the daily challenges that arose, loved seeing her staff succeed and grow in their positions. Quinn managed the property maintenance and expansion, always working on the next improvement or addition. They made a formidable team. Adelaide handled the business side, Quinn handled the physical labor, and they consulted with each other on every major decision. The respect they showed each other, the way they worked as genuine partners, became evident to everyone who stayed at the hotel. As winter set in, Adelaide discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She had not really thought about children yet. She had been so focused on the hotel. But Quinn's reaction erased her fears. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure delight, then immediately apologized for spinning her when she might be feeling delicate. "I am not delicate," Adelaide protested, but she was laughing too. "You are growing our child," Quinn said, his hand coming to rest gently on her still flat stomach. "That makes you the opposite of delicate. That makes you a miracle." Pregnancy did not slow Adelaide down much. She continued to run the hotel, though she did allow herself to delegate more tasks to her capable staff. Emma proved to be particularly skilled at management, and Adelaide began training her to eventually serve as assistant manager. "You are preparing for when the baby comes," Emma observed one day. "I am preparing for a lot of things," Adelaide said, "including making sure this hotel does not depend entirely on me. A good business should be able to run even when the owner is not present." "You are also giving me an opportunity I never thought I would have," Emma said softly. "After my husband died, I thought I would spend the rest of my life scraping by, barely able to feed my children. But you hired me, trained me, showed me I was capable of more than I ever imagined." "You have changed my life, Adelaide." Adelaide felt emotion well up in her chest. "You did the work, Emma. I just gave you the chance to show what you could do. That chance is everything." Quinn worried about Adelaide constantly during the pregnancy, trying to get her to rest more, to delegate more, to take better care of herself. She found his protectiveness endearing even when it was frustrating. "I am growing a baby, not dying of consumption," she told him one evening when he tried to insist she should not be on her feet so much. I know, but I worry. You are important to me, Adelaide. You and this baby, you are my whole world. How could she argue with that? So she compromised, resting more than she normally would, but not giving up her active role in the hotel entirely. It helped that the business was running smoothly. The hotel had become popular enough that Adelaide had been able to repay Quinn for all the timber he had provided, and they were even turning a modest profit. Thomas Whitmore, to his credit, did eventually acknowledge that he had been wrong. He appeared at the hotel one day in early spring and asked to speak with Adelaide privately. "I owe you an apology," he said stiffly. "I underestimated you. This hotel is exactly what Hecla needed, and you have run it far better than I would have thought possible. I was wrong to dismiss your plans based on your gender." Adelaide could have been petty, could have thrown his earlier dismissal back in his face, but she recognized how difficult this admission was for a man like Whitmore, how much it cost his pride to admit he had been wrong. So instead, she said simply, "Thank you for saying that, Mr. Whitmore. I appreciate your honesty. If you ever need financing for expansion," Whitmore continued, "my bank would be happy to discuss terms." Adelaide smiled slightly. "I will keep that in mind." After Whitmore left, Quinn came to find her, having observed the exchange from across the lobby. "That must have felt good." "It did," Adelaide admitted. "But you know what feels better? The fact that we succeeded without him, that we proved we did not need his approval or his financing. That feels better than any apology." Quinn kissed her forehead. "You are a remarkable woman, Adelaide Dalton." "We are a remarkable team," she corrected. Their son was born in late June of 1877, a healthy baby with Quinn's blue eyes and a set of lungs that could wake the entire hotel. They named him Thomas, after Adelaide's father, and from the moment Quinn held his son for the first time, Adelaide knew that their family was complete in a way she had not even known was possible. Quinn was a devoted father, spending every free moment with Thomas, rocking him to sleep, changing his diapers without complaint, talking to him in a low, gentle voice that made Adelaide's heart melt. Watching her strong, capable husband be so tender with their tiny son was perhaps the most beautiful thing Adelaide had ever witnessed. The hotel continued to thrive. As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, he became a fixture in the lobby, charming guests with his bright smile and adventurous spirit. The staff adored him, taking turns watching him when both Adelaide and Quinn were busy. On Thomas's second birthday, Adelaide stood on the hotel porch where she and Quinn had been married, looking out at everything they had built. The hotel had expanded, adding on 6 more rooms and a larger kitchen. They were discussing plans for a separate building that would house long-term residents, creating the beginnings of what Adelaide hoped would be a boarding house. Quinn came to stand beside her, his hand finding hers automatically. "What are you thinking about?" "Everything," Adelaide said. "How far we have come. How different my life is from what I thought it would be. How grateful I am that Thomas Whitmore laughed in my face that day, because it led me to you." "Funny how things work out," Quinn agreed. "I was content in my mountain cabin, convinced I would spend my life alone. Then I heard a gunshot and found a stubborn woman who refused to accept that her dreams were too big." Adelaide turned to face him fully. "They were not too big. Our dreams are never too big, Quinn. We proved that. We did." Quinn pulled her into his arms, and even after 3 years of marriage, Adelaide still felt that spark of electricity when he touched her. "I love you, Adelaide. I love our life, our son, our hotel, all of it. You have given me everything I never knew I wanted." "You gave me the same," Adelaide said. "You believed in me when no one else did. You helped me build my dreams when everyone said it was impossible. You showed me that partnership is not about one person supporting another, but about two people lifting each other up." They kissed there on the porch, as they had countless times before, as the hotel bustled with activity behind them and their son's laughter rang out from inside. It was a perfect moment, a crystallization of everything they had worked for and everything they had become. Over the years that followed, the Quinn Dalton Hotel became one of the most respected establishments in the Wyoming Territory. Adelaide's reputation as a shrewd but fair businesswoman grew, and she found herself being consulted by other entrepreneurs, both male and female, who were starting their own ventures. She never forgot how difficult her own start had been, and she made it a point to mentor others who faced similar obstacles. Quinn continued to manage the property side of the business, and eventually expanded into providing lumber and construction services to others in the region. His reputation for quality work and honest dealing made him highly sought after, and the business he built complemented the hotel perfectly. They had two more children, a daughter they named Rose when Thomas was 4, and another son, James, 2 years after that. Their home, a comfortable house they built next to the hotel, was always full of laughter and activity. Adelaide managed to balance her roles as businesswoman, wife, and mother in a way that would have been impossible in Boston, but somehow worked in the Wyoming Territory, where the rules were still being written, and a determined woman could carve out her own path. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Quinn surprised Adelaide with a gift. He led her outside to find a new sign being installed above the hotel's entrance. It read, "Quinn Dalton Hotel and Restaurant, established 1876 by Adelaide Greene and Quinn Dalton, built on dreams too big for small minds." Adelaide stared at the sign, then looked at Quinn with tears in her eyes. "You remembered." "I remember everything you have ever told me," Quinn said softly, "including the day the banker said your dreams were too big for a woman. I wanted everyone who comes to this hotel to know that those dreams became reality, despite what people said. I wanted our children to see that sign and understand that they should never let anyone tell them what they can or cannot achieve." Adelaide threw her arms around him, not caring that they were in full view of the street, not caring about propriety or what people might think. "I love you so much. I love you too. Today, tomorrow, always." They stood there together, in front of the hotel they had built, surrounded by the life they had created. And Adelaide thought about how a single moment of courage, a single refusal to accept limitations, had changed everything. She had been told her dreams were too big, but she had pursued them anyway. And she had found a partner who not only supported those dreams but helped make them bigger, helped make them real. The Quinn Dalton Hotel stood as a testament to what could be accomplished when two people believed in each other, when ambition was met with support rather than dismissal, when dreams were nurtured rather than crushed. It was more than just a building. It was proof that the impossible could become possible, that the voice saying no was not the final word, that with determination, skill, and the right partner, anything could be achieved. Adelaide Greene had traveled 2,000 miles to chase a dream that everyone said was too big for a woman. Quinn Dalton had emerged from his mountain solitude to help her build that dream. Together, they had created something extraordinary. A successful business, yes, but more than that. They had created a family, a legacy, a life filled with love and purpose and possibility. And every day, when Adelaide walked through the doors of her hotel and saw guests being welcomed, saw her staff thriving, saw the life buzzing around her, she remembered the moment when Quinn had first said, "I will help you build them." Those 6 words had changed her life, had given her not just a business partner but a true partner in every sense of the word. Years later, when their children were grown and the hotel had expanded into a thriving enterprise with multiple buildings and a staff of over 30 people, Adelaide and Quinn would sit on that same porch where they had been married and marvel at how far they had come. "You ever miss it?" Adelaide asked Quinn one evening as the sun set over the mountains he had once called his only home. "The solitude, the quiet life you had before me." Quinn took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing over the decades. "Not even for a second. That life was just existing, Adelaide. This with you, this is living. I could not have done any of this without you." "Yes, you could have," Quinn said firmly. "You would have found a way because that is who you are. You do not give up. You do not accept limitations. You make the impossible happen." He smiled at her, that warm smile she had fallen in love with all those years ago. "But I am incredibly grateful that I got to be part of it, that I got to stand beside you and watch you prove everyone wrong, that I got to love you through all of it." Adelaide rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the strength that had always been her foundation even as she built her own strength. "We made a good life, did we not? The best life," Quinn agreed, and it was true. They had built more than a hotel. They had built a family, a legacy, a testament to what could be achieved when people refused to accept the limitations others tried to place on them. They had proved that dreams were never too big, that with courage and determination and the right partner, anything was possible. The sign above the hotel entrance, proclaiming that the establishment had been built on dreams too big for small minds, stood as a reminder to everyone who saw it. A reminder that the word impossible was just a challenge to be overcome. A reminder that partnership meant supporting each other's dreams, not diminishing them. A reminder that love, real love, meant helping each other become the best versions of themselves. Adelaide Greene had arrived in Wyoming with nothing but a leather satchel full of rejected plans and a stubborn refusal to give up. Quinn Dalton had been hiding in the mountains, convinced that solitude was safer than connection. Together, they had built something neither could have created alone. They had built dreams, built a life, built a love that would endure long after they were gone. And every day, as guests checked in and out of the Quinn Dalton Hotel, as their children and eventually grandchildren ran through the halls, as the business continued to thrive and grow, that love story lived on. A reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from refusing to accept no for an answer, from finding a partner who sees your potential rather than your limitations, from dreaming big and working hard and never, ever giving up. The banker had said her dreams were too big for a woman. The mountain man had said he would help her build them. And together, Adelaide and Quinn had proved that with love, partnership, and sheer determination, no dream was too big after all.